All right, let's just say you've been fired from your job of 5 years, or your husband or wife leaves you. There's been a tragedy in your country, any worst case scenario you can imagine. If someone came along and told you that in reality, this horrible situation is the best opportunity for spiritual practice, you might think they're crazy. But this is what the Buddha taught: how to transform problems into the path of enlightenment. It makes sense. The world is still full of war and poverty, and our minds are full of delusions like anger, jealousy, and attachment. Problems are constant. But we can learn to use these otherwise unfortunate circumstances as an opportunity to accelerate our spiritual growth. Using techniques based on loving kindness and compassion for others and ourselves, we can learn to face difficult situations with skill, wisdom, and humor, and literally transform problems into happiness.
Transforming suffering into the path to enlightenment is at the very heart of the Buddha's Mahayana teachings. But these thought transformation techniques are, in fact, very difficult to practice. When they were first taught, they were kept secret for that very reason, because of their difficulty. Thought transformation techniques are based in bodhicitta, and therefore it's essential when one receives these teachings to receive them with a mind imbued by bodhicitta, the attitude wishing to attain enlightenment as quickly as possible, in order to understand thought transformation correctly. Therefore, for that reason, generate in your mind now a strong intention to achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible in order to bring to enlightenment all other suffering mother sentient beings quickly.
So I assume everybody here has problems? Yeah. Often when we have problems, we feel like we're the only people who have problems. But wouldn't you say everybody has problems? But our problems are worse than other people's, right? Isn't it? Definitely, 100% worse, yeah. So we should be the object of other people's sympathy and their compassion and their aid. And the way to transform our problems is to get them to stop doing all the nasty things they're doing towards us, right? That's not actually transforming our problem, that's throwing the problem at the other person, okay? Telling them that they're the source of our problem, and believing it ourselves, that other people are the source of our problems. Okay? When we have that view on life, you know, that I'm just this little old innocent, sweet, charming, wonderful, joyful person who doesn't mean harm to anybody, and yet all these mean, nasty, cruel, vicious, ununderstanding people cause me problems. We have to totally get out of this idea of blaming. Yeah. Because we're very much, I think, a country and a culture that likes to point the finger and blame. And, you know, you caused it, you did it, you're going to suffer. Okay? If there's a problem, you know, finding somebody to blame means finding somebody that we can cause to suffer, thinking that when somebody else suffers, we're going to feel better afterwards. Okay? I think that whole way of looking at life doesn't work. Okay? because it's not about finding one cause, because everything's interdependent and everybody contributes something. Okay? And it's not about finding the cause so that we can punish somebody. Now, how do we work with problems? How do we transform problems? Okay. I think it depends on how we look at a situation. Okay? First of all, how we define a problem. Because there could be some event going on with somebody else, and you can call it a problem, or you can call it an opportunity. And this is kind of the difference between whether we're looking at things in a worldly way or whether we're looking at them in a spiritual way. Okay? Because in a worldly way, we label a situation a problem when our needs and wants aren't getting met. Isn't that kind of the definition of a problem for you? When your needs and wants aren't getting met, when your expectations aren't getting met, when your plans aren't happening. Okay? So we have an idea of the situation, and what we're looking for is pleasure and happiness and getting our way and being right. Okay? That's kind of what our goal is. Yeah? Our goal in a situation is my happiness. When the goal of my happiness, and preferably my happiness now rather than later, okay, when that goal is frustrated, we call that a problem. Okay? So, yeah, and that's our usual worldly way of looking at things, isn't it? Okay? Now, if we're spiritual practitioners, the goal of any situation is not my pleasure. Think about that one for a while. Can you imagine living your life where the goal is not your own pleasure and not your own happiness? Does that seem like something that's possible? Hello out there. If we're trying to practice a spiritual path, our goal in a situation is not my happiness. Our goal is to learn. Okay? Our goal is to learn about ourselves. Our goal is to learn about others. Our goal is to, through this learning, be able to purify our own mind and develop our own good qualities. Our goal is, through this learning, to be able to contribute to the welfare of the world, to, help sentient other living beings along the path to enlightenment, to help them even in some, ordinary way now. So when we change that paradigm, when our goal in a situation is different, okay, then it becomes much more difficult to have problems. So in everything that we experience, everything that we do, there's always something to learn. If we approach life with that my purpose in this situation is to learn something that in the end of the day will be useful for myself and for others, then we're never going to have a problem because in every situation we can learn. When our focus becomes on our own training and our own practice, then our focus stops being to make other people change and make other people different so that they stop causing our problems, because we realize at some level that we can't. Okay? The transformation of the problems starts here with this one. Okay? And it starts with looking at our reactions to the situations that we're in and really being able to look honestly at our reactions, not paint them over, not be sweet, okay, but really kind of be able to sit there and, okay, somebody's acting this way. Why am I reacting in this? What do I think I need from this person that they aren't giving me? And how, where does contentment really come from? When you're content, do you get angry? No. When you're content, do you get jealous? When you're content, do you hold on to a grudge? When you're content, are you full of greed and craving? When you're content, do you hide your mistakes and pretend you don't have them? When you're content, do you pretend to be somebody you're not and impress people falsely? No. It's like when there's a feeling of contentment in our own mind, then kind of naturally we act with kindness. And a lot of, all those negative emotions and then the behaviors that they cause, they just get pacified automatically because there's no dissatisfied, discontent feeling inside that motivates all of those other attitudes and behaviors. The kind of contentment that we're trying to develop is not the contentment of, I got my way, I got my needs met, the world's love me. It's not that. It's the contentment of us feeling okay about ourselves. It's come simply through our own spiritual practice by using our own mind. When Buddhism talks about contentment, we should not equate contentment with apathy. They're two different things. With apathy, we don't care. Okay? And you can be apathetic and discontent. Can't you? Yeah, and I think very often the nihilistic position that people go into in our society, of, well, it's all worthless, or it's just, you just sign it off. This is, it's discontent compounded with apathy. Okay, whereas contentment is a totally different ballgame. Okay, contentment is a feeling of well-being in ourselves. So we can have this contentment, some kind of self-confidence. And that will lead us to have compassion for others, rather than criticize them and pick them to bits, have compassion for them. And then based on that compassion, act against injustice or prejudice or intercede when there's a harmful situation. Okay? So that compassion can be just as strong of a motivator and a much wiser one than anger. And contentment, we can be content and we can still want to improve things in the future. Okay? There's a sense of well-being in ourselves that doesn't depend on how the world treats us. Okay? There's a sense of well-being in the self that comes through our own spiritual practice. So there's an inner sense of contentment that isn't dependent upon, getting what we want, having people like us and love us and appreciate us and tell us we're right and intelligent and blah, blah, blah. Okay? So, but on the basis of that inner sense of contentment, it doesn't mean that we eschew the rest of the world and block it out and fall into apathy, okay? Because again, motivated by compassion, we can still act to remedy injustice, remedy discrimination, but the way we do it is not going to be in an angry way. We can see, okay, I have a problem and somebody's treating me unfairly or there's discrimination against me or whatever. Have that sense of inner contentment, yeah. But then actively work to change the situation, not because we hate the other people in it, but because we care about them. Okay? So the person, you care about the person who's oppressing you. You care about the person whose political ideas you think are totally corrupt. Okay? You care about the person who's destroying the environment. You care about the person who's beating up your loved one. Okay? This is very opposite from our usual way of thinking, isn't it? Okay? But, you know, our usual way of thinking hasn't gotten us anywhere, so we might as well try another way. Okay? Because the thing is, if there's this conflict situation, we see the other person as an enemy, and we don't care about their well-being, okay, then we're likely to inflict more harm out of anger, okay? So first of all, we're creating negative karma because we have a negative motivation of anger that has the intention to harm. Second of all, we destroy the other person's happiness. You know, because they're more miserable, then they're going to do more that harms us back, so we're just escalating the conflict. So we fight oppression or, you know, injustice or ecological devastation or whatever out of care for the quote-quote enemy, because we don't see them as an enemy that's out there that's inherently evil. We see them as another living being just like us who wants to be happy. So this takes, you know, I'm just kind of explaining this using words, yeah? But to actually understand it, we need to sit, okay? This isn't something that we're going to get through just intellectual understanding. We have to really sit, you know, in our meditation practice and think about this. And then we need to examine our own mind. Be able to identify in our own mind when we're content and when we're discontent. Be able to identify in our mind when we're really accepting things and when we've gone into nihilism or apathy. We need to look in our own mind and identify, what does anger feel like? What does genuine compassion feel like? What is a positive aspiration? What does that feel like? So really understanding these things all depends on our own meditation practice. It's not dependent on intellectual understanding. Okay?
You know, in order to be able to work with, you know, a problem or a difficult situation, in the sense that it doesn't, you know, upset you or make you angry or like that, it's not so much that one part of it is having an antidote at the time, you know, or using a technique at the time, right? But I think far more important than that is that one has, you know, a fairly steady, continual, solid practice. You know, meditating on Lam-Rim every day, and not just one part of it, but, you know, gradually going through the whole Lam-Rim. Not choosing like one part that you like and not doing one part that you don't like, but consistently and continually meditating on the Lam-Rim, right? So that really is the basis, because if your mind is becoming more calm, more steady on a daily basis by meditating on the Lam-Rim, then when situations arise there's less chance of being overwhelmed by a negative emotion such as anger or attachment or desire. You're much better or well prepared for the situation. Yeah? And so therefore, in one sense, it's almost more natural because you see the situation. There's better chance or more chance of seeing the situation for what it is, as opposed to what you're projecting or karmically projecting onto the situation. Somebody who's has been familiarizing themselves with impermanence day after day after day, doing it, properly, effectively, then somebody dies or, there's separation or, in terms of time, if the time changes or a situation changes, it's much more easy to accept. It's much more easy to accept is because your mind is already prepared and more closer to reality, right? If you're making your mind more familiar with this reality that others exist, they have suffering, they don't want suffering, same as yourself, right? It's very sort of straightforward thing. It's reality, Others exist, they're important, they have problems, they suffer, just like oneself, right? So if you're day after day familiarizing yourself with that, and then you come up with a situation, a problem between yourself and some other person or some other people, then your attitude is already, there's less thinking of oneself and more thinking of the other person. So almost already you don't have a problem, because, you'll find in most situations problems arise, or problem exists, or it appears to exist, is mainly because of ego, self-cherishing mind, attachment to one's own happiness. So that's really the basis of creating the problem. And it doesn't mean that outside there isn't a difficult situation, but inside there's not a problem in the sense of like it appearing like a problem, so that you're becoming emotional, you're becoming angry, you're becoming jealous, you're becoming some way upset, your mind is disturbed, right? So therefore, of course, that difficult situation is made very complicated because of the mind being disturbed inside. Whereas, if there is a difficult situation, you have every chance of resolving it if you really are concerned about that other person or what that other person is going through or experiencing. If you really want to help that other person, there's not a problem. The situation still can be difficult, but there's not really a problem. I mean, the mind, your mind, is not disturbed or unhappy.